Tonight is Hoshana Rabbah, which means it's the 21st of Elul, 21st of Tishrei, this 5785. And I don't know what day it is Leminyanam, because I'm not involved in that, thank God.
I don't think they hear you again.
Gentlemen, can you hear me over there? Testing?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, welcome. I'm very happy to have you all in the Sukkah. It's nice to see you. And it's in your merit that we've had such a, I guess that we've merited to have such a large Sukkah this year. This is the first time we've built it this large. Thank God. People just give me pieces of Sukkah and we're able to keep expanding it. And we should, God willing, have the capacity to keep more mitzvahs and involve more people with mitzvahs. We also like to thank the Rabbi for joining us this evening. Okay, we're
all, I'm sure, I speak for everybody when I say that we're all happy and honored to be here in the home of Yedidanu HaMechubad, Chacham, Rav Avi Grossman.
Is this the Rav's first time in Kochav Yaakov?
I've been in Kochav Yaakov in the past at some point, I don't recall exactly when.
Well, here it is. It's thank God Kochav Yaakov has enjoyed a special blessing during the China virus times. Thank God, we had no serious illnesses, no fatalities, even though people were saying all sorts of terrible things were happening. It seems that we had divine protection here. So we thank God Almighty for protecting us. And so far also this war, things have been quiet. It's a very quiet place, thank God. It's a special, once again, a special zechut to be here. I was wanting to tell everybody that I don't believe that there's anything new that we're undergoing today that we have not experienced in our history. There's nothing new under the sun, and even secular historians have noticed that history tends to repeat itself. So the Jewish people have found themselves in similar situations before, and God willing, we'll make the best of it. God should save us, allow us to destroy our enemies, and we'll get back to where we were back in the best of times. Now, shortly before the Jewish people experienced what was then the best of times, the first Messianic era, the time of David and Shlomo, they had to have a few, falling points. So before the Mishkan in Shilo was destroyed, there were Jews who were not keeping the commandment to visit the temple. It says, right at the beginning of Sefer Shmuel, that Shmuel's father Elkanah would go up to sacrifice and to bow down to Lord of Hosts in Shiloh. And the sages note that was unique because back then people did not really keep that mitzvah, and he would go around encouraging people to do so. So you have to ask, is it possible that the Jewish people left a mitzvah like this orphaned, as the sages said? That wasn't the mitzvah to do, even though there was completely a mitzvah of the Torah, there was the opportunity to do it, but it says they just didn't do so. Now, this wasn't necessarily like the times we read about described, let's say, by Dvorah Neviah, where the leftover Canaanites made it difficult for people to go up Aliyah Regel. Chadalu Achot B'Yisrael and Prazon, and the rest that she sings about. Ad Shekamti Ein B'Yisrael. But at that time, it was just a matter of encouraging people. So you have to ask, well, what was going on? And the answer is, unfortunately, that sometimes we forget to keep our mitzvahs even when we have the opportunity. We have the opportunity to do so. Now, unfortunately, the temple stands in ruins and there is no sacrificial service. But that doesn't prevent us from at least doing what we can. Prayer. Or maybe even moving ahead with concrete plans to rebuild the temple. We need a lot more Jews on board. We're not there yet. But we're getting there. Things are majorly improving. 150 years ago, there was barely a Jewish community here in the land of Israel, and things have changed for the better. It's because we have taken, as a people, we've put in the effort, even an effort by some secular people to settle the land. Hopefully, I don't know, God should give them the inspiration to repent and start believing in Him and keeping more mitzvahs. But first we have to work on the Jews who are supposedly observant of the commandments. We want to observe more commandments. We want to get more people involved. That's what we have to do. So if you've been to the Beis HaMikdash this Yontif, that's good. Bring a friend, encourage others. I found that even with people who are in yeshiva, scholars, rabbis, it just takes a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of what they call iyun, mechkar, look into the matter, and they'll see that there is what they can do. there are too many of us in yeshiva, like I was 20-something years ago, who straight up think it's just forbidden. That's it. You remember the tchelis? How many people here are wearing tchelis now? How many of you were wearing tchelis 30 years ago? 30 years ago. Yeah, 30 years ago. So I was introduced to it 24 years ago. So oh, good. Thank God. You go and you get a chance to learn. But for the most part, it's the same tchelis that have been around for quite a few decades. What's the difference? More people are looking into it. Even rabbis, to whom many people look up, have come around only in their old age to doing such a thing once they finally looked into it. I remember, for example, a good example would be Rabbi Belsky in New York, the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das. So he doesn't come from circles. He's in Chutz La'aretz. He's still in the Gullus. But in his last years, he became a very strong advocate. Why? What changed?
He learned.
He learned. He looked into it. He looked into something. This is new. Oh, look, now you have an opportunity, like I said before. If Rabbi Nachman had the chance to go pray on Har HaBayis, would he pass up to the chance? If the Chavetz Chaim were with us today, what would he do? I don't know. But I would hope that a personality like his would take this and chop a rhyme. So that's what we have to do. We spoke before about, I'm speaking too much already. We'll discuss more about how this is the holiday of the building of the Beis HaMikdash.
Relax.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay, fine.
You don't have to be...
I have to apologize. Okay, fine. This is the holiday of the building of the Beis HaMikdash, right? Correct? Is it true? Why? You know the answer?
It's much well known.
Oh, good. Yeah. So you know the final answer. Most people forgot. Certainly in Eretz Yisrael, I found people weren't aware of this. Let's go backwards. The Vilna Gaon says, David, my apologies for the rerun. But this was two people were listening earlier today. What was the date of Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei, right? What happened on the 15th of Tishrei in Jewish history that became a Jewish holiday? So the Vilna Gaon fills it in, says that's the day the clouds of glory came back, because they had departed the Israelite camp in the wilderness when they made the golden calf, and they came back when the Israelites started constructing the tabernacle. So the 15th of Tishrei is the construction of the tabernacle. That's when it started, so it became a holiday that celebrates the clouds of glory. That's the Vilna Gaon that everybody knows. The Vilna Gaon, the second half, is less known. And that is the Vilna Gaon on Bar-Hayim, where he points out that whereas it looks like it's a machlokas in the Bavli, Sukkah, what's it supposed to be? Ananei Kavod or Sukkahs Mamish Asu? They made real Sukkahs. That's what most people know about that machlokas. When you have schach, you're trying to imitate a cloud of glory, or you're trying to imitate building a hut from what you have left over in your threshing floor from the harvest. Vegetation that is not food and not a kli. It's not an implement. That's a machlokas. They connected Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish to this machlokas, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Are you trying to copy Ananei Kavod? Or are you trying to copy Sukkahs Mamish? Real sukkahs, actual booths that they built, right? People know that. But the problem is, like the Vilna Gaon points out, you see none other than Rashi ignores this machlokas in a few places. Rashi in his Perush on the Torah, and the first daf of the Masechta, says that when you build a sukkah, you're trying to emulate the clouds of glory. He doesn't give any, respect, or he doesn't mention the other opinion that says, no, you're trying to build sukkahs mamish. Why doesn't he mention the machlokas? Why does he just stick with clouds of glory? That's what we're trying to copy. Why does the Torah do that? Why does Onkelos do that? How does Onkelos translate Sukkot, Kivas Sukkot Oshavti? What does he say? Ananei Mitalaya. Ananei. Sukkah, the clouds. Okay? He goes with it was clouds of glory opinion. Why does the Zohar ignore that? The Torah, the Shulchan Aruch, among many others, for some reason, they just stick with this clouds of glory idea. They don't mention what Rabbi Akiva seems to say, Sukkahs Mamish. What happened to Sukkahs Mamish? So the Grub points you to the original Medrash, which is a Medrash halacha there. It's not, the Bavli doesn't have the original, and the same account in the Yerushalmi, where the names are reversed, and the words are slightly different. It's Hayu and not Asu. And then in the Yerushalmi, unlike Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish disagreeing about what you're trying to copy when you make schach, Sukkahs Mamish or Ananei Kavod, there you actually have a direct quote from both Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan that you're actually trying to copy the clouds of glory. So it seems unanimous what the Gra is pointing to here, That's why is the Gra bringing this, by the way? The Gra is just mentioning that the Shulchan Aruch goes with this whole clouds of glory interpretation of the holiday and not Sukkah's Mamish. And that's what the Gra is trying to answer. Where's the Sukkah's Mamish? So the Gra is saying it's because, really, in the olden days, aside from the Bavli, everybody knew that, no, it's about the clouds of glory, because this is the holiday that on which we celebrate that because Am Yisrael is given the commandment, Asu li mikdash, start building a mikdash, v'shachanti b'thocham. God's presence will be among all of them. The clouds of glory surround the people. They're not in the tabernacle, they're over us. So that's what we're celebrating here. That's this holiday. And there's more to what the Gra says. La halacha, by the way, what you're trying to copy. So in the Yerushalmi, when we have schach, it's only because Chazal recognize materials in certain ways. There's the inanimate, mineral, and then there's vegetative, and then there's living, and then there's that which is attached or unattached, that which is alive, not alive, that which is a kli, not a kli, or fashioned into a kli. Chazal said, look, a cloud is basically, it grows out of the ground from the pasuk, the mist comes out of the ground, but it's detached from the ground, and it's not makabel tuma, it's not a kli. So whatever you use for your schach should also have the same qualifications. I guess they're saying, really, if you had a machine that could project a cloud over your head, you could use that. We have such a thing now, but that's not what they said. We use that which is not a kli and grew from the ground, but is detached from the ground. So that's what we're trying to go for here. And like Nas and Tzvi said, right? No, Tzvi. You're just regular Tzvi. Nas and Tzvi. What did you say? The Shmini Atzeres was a holiday also in Potentia until they inaugurated the first temple. Solomon looked at the calendar and said, we're going to have a big celebration of inaugurating this first temple. We're going to get to the height of Jewish history, and that's going to coincide with what holiday? The 8th day of this holiday. The first day of the holiday marks when we started building the Mikdash, and the clouds of glory returned, and the final day, the climax of this holiday, God and us, that's when we completed building the first temple. That's when they inaugurated it. That's what the Haftarah of the day is, by the way. Just now in Eretz Yisrael, we don't read that. We read the Simchas Torah Haftarah, so it's a little bit off kilter. In Chutz La'aretz, they still read that Haftarah. So I think that you should read that so that people know that's what the holiday is about. So this is the holiday about building the Beis HaMikdash and enjoying God's presence. And by the way, that's what I love to say, they should have asked Moshe Rabbeinu. He told them, you are going to leave Egypt on the 15th of Nisan. Get ready. And forevermore, the 15th of Nisan will be a holiday marking the Exodus. And 6 days later will be another holiday. That's the 7th of Pesach. So they should have asked him, Moshe Rabbeinu, what's supposed to happen 6 days after the Exodus? Why would that also be a holiday? But I don't know if any Talmidim asked him at the time. All of our holidays have already been marked on the calendar from way back when. Shabbos itself existed in Potentia until Am Yisrael came about. And then it became a holy day, given to us. So too, my calendar is marked with 5 holidays. 4 holidays. Okay? My calendar is marked with a number of holidays. There are supposed to be holidays this year. So far, one we missed. But they're supposed to be holidays. They're holidays in potential. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, those are supposed to be holidays. They haven't turned into holidays yet. So they could have asked Eliah Kohen. They could have asked Gidon. They could have asked even Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, we know now there's a holiday marking when we started building the Mishkan. What is supposed to happen a week later? What is the Shmini Atzeres all about? For 480 years of Jewish history, Shmini Atzeres was a holiday because God said so, but only the most astute, maybe the prophets, knew what was supposed to happen that day in our history. And only became a holiday once we actually built the Beis HaMikdash. So that's what we're celebrating now, and that's why I find it even more surprising on this holiday that celebrates the beginning of the construction of the tabernacle and culminates with the inauguration of the temple in Jerusalem. No one wants to go to the Beis HaMikdash. Or maybe just by no one, I mean a vast minority. I was walking up that boardwalk thing that they built to allow Jews onto Har HaBayis in limited amounts. They limit the groups in size, they limit the groups in actual number, the number of groups, they limit the time you can go there, they limit what you can do, they limit everything that they can. And I was looking down, almost 10 o'clock in the morning, down at the so-called Kotel Plaza, and it was great. They were davening. There was a service going on there. There was a Birkat Kohanim. It's great. It was the biggest shul in the world. And I was wondering, are there Shishim Ribo here? Can we say the bracha? But that was Am Yisrael down there, and they're all down there. And only the minority were going up to the Beis HaMikdash today. And there were signs continuing this, I wouldn't call it, telling people, welcome Aliyah L'Regel to the Kotel. It's good to go there to be with Am Yisrael and to daven, but that's not Aliyah L'Regel. That's not 100%. Everybody just stopped at the line. Yesterday I heard Rabbi Wolfson say that Rabbi Shar Yashuv Cohen said that it used to be the Kotel was the outer wall of the Temple Mount, and now it's become the mechitza between Am Yisrael and the Temple Mount. So, I don't know. I cannot get over this fact. I cannot get over how many people I know, friends and family and Jews who want to keep the Torah, have not gone to the Beis HaMikdash or made an attempt, because the more of us who honestly want to do this and are involved in doing this, the farther along we're going to get. Yeah, please.
Ron, you said it's a lack of information.
No, I said lack of study and investigation.
Right. So maybe what's needed is to create a document and distribute it widely that gives all of the sources and the arguments and the information, so that and also contact information so people can find out more.
Such documents exist.
Yeah.
But
Matter
I
of
don't
fact,
think most people have seen them.
I think
That's
that.
the issue,
I think so. I have such a. I was just at an institution down the block which has 3 such documents. These documents are held in very high regard by the Jewish people. It's considered their holiest document. They stand up for this document whenever it moves. They take it out and they read it with reverence on all of their holy occasions. And it says explicitly in many places that this is what they're supposed to do. And they read it dafka, specifically on their holidays, telling them to do such a thing, because since they were given this document, they were told to do this by their writer of this document. Read this document. Yeah.
It does not address the machlokas,
because there is.
There are rabbis who say not to go.
Because there is no such machlokas. God said so. So that's why we have to read. We have to tell people when they read the Torah.
It needs to be publicized. There needs to be distribution of it.
Allow me to jump in for a moment.
Please, or take over. I'm done.
I need the mic.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to interrupt you. You continue. I just wanted to add something.
It's your car.
Getting too sorry.
Great back.
Please.
Shalom Aleichem, Hag Sameach. Despite the fact that we are in the middle, I don't even know, in fact, if we are at the midpoint, I doubt it, in fact. I think we're still at the early stages of a long war. But nevertheless, with all the pain and all the tragedies that involves, this is still a chag, and we have to be sameach. Sameach. With regards to the mikdash that we were discussing now, the mayor was discussing this with me on the way over here earlier. And Mayor asked me, he was telling me that he had some argument with a certain person who describes himself as Haredi about going to Har HaBayit, whether it's mutar or not. And my advice to Meir was, don't even discuss it with this person, because this person, without knowing it, is part of a cult. The Haredi position on Har HaBayit has nothing to do, I stress, I repeat, I hope you can hear me down the other end, has nothing to do with halakha, has nothing to do with any halachic source. There is no halachic source which would allow one to claim that it is asur, or desirable or preferable not to go on to Har HaBayit. There simply is no such source. This is a deliberate distortion of the Torah and of the Halakha. So what is it? It's a cult. It's a cult. It's the same cult that the Rav Grossman mentioned a moment ago that prevented in the past, and to this day as well, many people from putting Techeleth onto their tzitzit, right? Here you have this terribly controversial thread. Obviously, this is a disaster. This was going to bring down Yiddishkeit. Torah Judaism will collapse if people actually keep the mitzvah of the Torah. But that is the position of some people. This too, of course, is just a cultish practice or belief or claim. Has nothing to do with the Torah, has nothing to do with the halakha. And as Rav Grossman said very correctly, when honest, serious Talmidei Chachamim, who may have held a certain opinion, actually look into something, go into it deeply with a true desire to know the truth, they're perfectly capable of achieving a correct understanding. But if you're part of a cult, then there's no hope. And there's no point discussing it either, so don't waste your breath. The thing to do is to tell people that this is the truth, this is the Torah, this is the halakha. And the people who claim otherwise are simply living in some kind of what's the word? Olam medumyan, a virtual reality. It's a virtual reality. It has nothing to do with Torah, nothing to do with halakha. What does it have to do with in that case? It has to do with the example, the mashal that I've given many times in the past, and I allow myself once to repeat it. The Torah that many people understand can be compared to a circle, a circle which consists of a number of bricks, shall we say 10 bricks. You have a brick here, for example. Speaking of bricks, let's say you had 10 of these and you organize them into a circle.
We have more of the rough.
We have more, okay. Well, well, if you have someone who can act out what I'm saying, then we can do it that way. But for now, imagine a circle of 10 bricks. And then I come along and say to this person, okay, it's a very nice circle. Here's another brick. I'll show you for the camera. Here's a brick. Add it to the circle. What is that person going to do?
Too late.
You can't just add it to the circle because it doesn't fit. The bricks are they're connected, they're touching. How are you going to introduce this extra brick? You either have to remove one brick and insert the new brick in its place, in which case you still have only 10 bricks and you'll be missing the brick that you removed. Or you have to break the circle completely and start afresh and build a new circle with 11 bricks. So it is with the Torah. If the Torah of Chutz La'aretz, of Galuth, is like a circle of 10 bricks. You have Shabbat and Talmud Torah and Kashrut, etc., etc. But there were many mitzvot that were lost for various reasons. Techeleth, things to do with the Mikdash, things to do with fighting the enemy, destroying the enemy. Mitzvot Mehiyat Amalek, Lamashal, which is very topical at this point in time. How many people run to hear Parashat Zachor, but if you actually suggest to them that perhaps we should carry out what Parashat Zachor teaches us to do, then no, that's not that. That would be extreme. That would be wrong somehow, immoral. But
Well, what is the Haredi response?
They
I know the Rav gave the
claim
leftist
it's not in
response.
effect yet. That's what someone
it's the response to all these things is usually it's temporarily at least on hold, but no one can explain who put it on hold, what is the mechanism by which it's placed on hold, and how does it come off being on hold? How do you remove that how do you depress that hold button? No one seems to know. So many things were lost in Chutz La'aretz, in the Galuth, for many generations, and Jews just get used to what was. That's a natural, normal human weakness, to get used to something, whether it's good or bad. You get used to it. Once you're used to it, and once you mekadesh that thing, and you sanctify it, and you elevate it, and you define your connection to Torah, to Hashem, by that version of Torah, or Yiddishkeit, shall we call it? Maybe it's better to call it Yiddishkeit for our purposes. Once you define your understanding of Torah in those terms, then everything else is beyond the pale. And it's some strange idea that has no place in our Torah, in our world. But that, of course, is not true. That is a complete aberration. I saw someone who wrote recently about Haredim joining the army. Now this is a broad topic. I'm not going to go into it now. I have what to say on it. It's not what I have to say is not in agreement simply with one side or with the other side. But this person made a good point. He said the problem with the Haredi response or attitude is not that they refuse to go to the army. And I'm saying that they haven't got a very good point, because I think they do. Again, it's a long discussion. But he said the problem is not that they refuse to be in the army, they refuse to want to be in the army. In other words, there is no... Being in the army has nothing to do with Torah. And therefore, by definition, it doesn't interest them. There's no connection between Torah and an army. Why? Because in Minsk and Vinsk, or in Hungary, or in Sana'a, or in Marrakesh, there was no Jewish army. So it's just not part of Yiddishkeit. It's not part of the Torah. So what do you want from us? Now, I understand I could sit here for an hour defending the Haredi position. But nevertheless, there is truth to this claim, to this understanding, to this statement, that it's simply not viewed as a Torah value, and therefore it's not part of the. It's on the menu. It's not on the agenda. These are all symptoms of what I've referred to many times as Galut mode Judaism, right? GMJ. For short, and that is what we must all rid ourselves of. Whether it has to do with a Torah attitude and perspective on military service, whether it has to do with how to pronounce Lashon HaKodesh, whether it has to do with Har HaBayit, whether it has to do with Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, whatever it might be. I, for instance, am very bothered every time I hear people refer to the Miswah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael by the newfangled term Chalutziut or Tzionut. I have no understanding of what those terms mean. As far as I know, Avraham Avinu was a Halutz, and Moshe Rabbeinu had Halutzei Sava that he spoke with, that he commanded, that he instructed. These are not new concepts. Tzionut is a new concept, and that is why I very much agree with the statement that I heard by Hagaon Harav Eliyahu Rahamim Zini from Haifa. I heard him in a shiur, a recording of a shiur. I heard him say, when people ask me, are you Tzioni Dati? So he says no. And they asked him why not, and he says he answered because if you say Ani Tzioni Dati, that means whether you mean it or not, and whether you understand or not, this is what it really means. It means that you're Ani 50% Dati v 50% Tzioni. I'm 50% the one and 50% the other. And he says, I'm not 50% of anything. I'm 100% Dati or Torani, or to call it what you will, and 100%, he used the term Tzioni, which I wouldn't use personally, because I don't really understand what it means. But you understand what he's getting at. You cannot be a bit of this and a bit of that, because that is just wishy-washy. It is not real. And this has everything to do with another question that is discussed and addressed by many people, and that is, why are there so many young people in the younger generation, and not only, by the way, the younger generation, it happens also at older ages sometimes. But for now, let's address the younger generation. Why are there so many people brought up in homes where Dati, Torani, sometimes even Haredi homes, they leave the Torah altogether, or become very wishy-washy. They become light. They're very, very wishy-washy towards the Torah. And different people offer different explanations. Some people say, well, it has to do with the Torah that they received, that they were taught was not warm enough, it wasn't accepting enough, or they didn't like the Rav in Kita Daled, so they left the Torah. You know, I don't buy those explanations. I'm very sorry. I think the true explanation is as follows. In every society has an elite. It may not be an elite by right, it may not be worthy of being an elite, the group of people who set the tone and who make the rules essentially and run everything, otherwise known as a deep state. And every country has a deep state. Israel has one of the biggest deep states on the planet. Every society has such an elite, often self-appointed and not worthy at all, but in practice they call the shots and they set the tone. And there's a natural human tendency to wish to fit in with that tone and with that elite, with that aristocracy, as it were, that is in control and whose will is essentially what carries the day. In a country where the so-called elite are not God-fearing, sometimes quite the opposite, where they are not connected to the Torah, or at least the Torah is not very important to them, and they have all kinds of other ideas and value systems and ideologies to which they subscribe. A person who wishes to be seen as serious and with it and intelligent and erudite tends to adopt those positions. And that is essentially how these things work. A certain professor, a religious man, said to me once about many dati, religious people, who get involved in, the academic life, and they wish to, quite naturally, they wish to be promoted, they wish to get ahead. He said to me in Hebrew, many of these people become meshumadim. I said, what do you mean by that? The word meshumad means basically an apostate. And he said, they continue to keep Shabbat, they continue to eat kasher, they still wear a kippah very often, some of them, many of them. There are those who don't precisely for this reason, but many of them do. But their entire mode of thinking, their value system, the way they view the world and all current events is through the prism that the elite imposes upon them, and they adopt it, sometimes knowingly, willingly, deliberately, and other times by a process of osmosis. They absorb these ideas, they absorb these attitudes, and it replaces who they once were, if they were anyone at all before, if they weren't a blank slate. Some people are just a blank slate, they don't know exactly where they are, so it's easy to impose the elite position on them. But even if it means that you have to change your attitudes, your ideas, your beliefs, you do that in order to be in with the right crowd, with the elite, with the people who call the shots. That is the true reason for what is called in Hebrew datlashiyut, for people who simply cease to be loyal to the Torah. So what is the answer? What is the way to battle, to combat this this problem. The Haredi response is a practical response up to a certain point, which is to cut yourself off entirely from everything that's going on, certainly from the state, from the powers that be, from the elite, from the deep state. And by so doing, you are possibly able to limit the extent to which their ideas and their concepts permeate your own life and infiltrate your own family. But only up to a point, because they're still the elite. You haven't removed them from being the elite. They're still there. They're still in power, and they still wish to impose their worldview, their set of values on you, whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not. So the problem with that approach is that it doesn't offer any solution, really, not a long-term real solution, which is to replace that elite with something else. What needs to happen is that elite has to be replaced with another kind of elite, a different type of a Torah-oriented elite. In order to do that, you have to be well-read, erudite, well-educated. You cannot produce an elite if you limit the educational possibilities of your children and grandchildren, so that they will be considered ignorant and lacking in many ways compared to the so-called elite. That no one will take them seriously. That you have to produce people who shine, who sparkle with knowledge, with intelligence, with ability, and people who are willing to call a spade a spade. The first thing is to know that we have to think in our own terms, which means in Torah terms, only in Torah terms. Everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we believe is to be found in this book here. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. A book which is not learnt in Haredi yeshivot, unfortunately, not systematically, not as a matter of course, unfortunately. In most yeshivot, not sufficiently. True.
They teach it to the girls.
Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. Again, only up to a point. We have we have the pasuk in Tehillim, وَيِتْعَرْفُوا بَغَوْيِمْ وَيِلْمْذُوا مَعَسَهَمْ. The first thing about being Jewish is to know that we are not mitharev b'ma'asehim, and not only ma'asehim, also their thoughts, their dress, their practices, their attitudes to everything. We must constantly clarify to ourselves and to all of those around us that we do not accept any of their premises. We do not accept any of their premises, any of their assumptions. We proceed from a very different set of assumptions, completely different. And this is precisely I go back to what I said before, this is precisely the problem with the hashkafa, the outlook, the ideology known as Tzionut Datit. Because if you describe yourself as being Tzioni, at least 50%, shall we say, first of all, the 50% rapidly becomes 70% and 80%, because that's the process that we were describing. And second of all, you cannot criticize, you cannot go against the flow, and therefore you cannot be authentic and true to who you are, to who you should be, to who the Jewish people are. It has to be stated for the record that Tzionut as an ideology, as it was developed by those who coined the term and who defined it, was something designed to replace the Torah. In other words, according to the Torah, who is a Jew, the question, mihu Yehudi, has an answer, a very simple, straightforward halachic answer. Either you were born Jewish, or you were converted to Judaism api halacha, and you keep the Torah. And you intended to keep the Torah at the time of your conversion. That is how you can become, that's how you're Jewish. According to Tzionut, as described 120 years ago, if you felt Jewish, or you wanted to identify with something Jewish, you were Jewish. This is not a joke. This is very real. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the fact that in all the kibbutzim that were attacked exactly 1 year ago, short of a day, on the border with Gaza, all of these kibbutzim were extremely left-wing, and in these kibbutzim there were many, I don't know the exact number obviously, but there were not a few couples, mixed marriages, Jews and non-Jews. This is very common in these circles, very common. Why? Because there's no cogent reason why it should not be so. Why should and it's not just in those kibbutzim. I know of other examples. I have even distant relatives. I have a distant relative. In fact, I don't think I've ever met him, but I know who he is. He's technically my second cousin. He was brought up in a Shomer HaTzeir kibbutz, unfortunately. In the early 70s, approximately, some Swedish volunteer young lady appeared in their kibbutz. And you know what happens next. Boy meets girl, and well, ever since the mid-70s, he's been living in Sweden with his shiksa. That's just how it is, and he has two lovely, charming Swedish sons, for example. This is not an unusual or rare occurrence. This happened in very significant numbers in all these kibbutzim, in the 60s and the 70s, up to the mid or even late 70s, because then the anti-Zionism, the anti-Semitism, etc., began to take over. So how do we maintain and how do we create a different kind of Torah culture? So, just a couple of thoughts. If I'm speaking too long, just let me know, and I'm happy to stop at any time. We have in Sefer Bereshith, we have the tragic story of Dinah bat Yaakov, right? What Teseh, Perek Lamed Daled in Sefer Bereshith, at the beginning, What Teseh Dinah bat Leah, Asher Yolada Yaakov, Lir'oth Bivnot Ha'aras. What does that mean? Dinah, who was probably around somewhere between 9 and 15 years old, let's say she was 12 or 13 to average it out. That's how it works out from all the context that we have. That's what Harav David Zvi Hoffman writes in his Perush, and I think he's correct. Let's say she was a young girl. What is? It's natural for a young girl to be curious, to wish to see. And remember, Dinah was an only girl, an only daughter in a family with 12 sons. She was an only girl. She had no one to look up to, no one to copy. It's quite normal and understandable that you would want to lir'oth bivnot ha'aretz, to go and see what the ways one of the Targumim, not Targum Onkelos, another Targum says nimuseh, the nimusim, the ways, the customs, the dress, the behavior of the local girls. The problem, of course, is that the local girls were from Shechem, and they're not the kind of people you want to know about, and not the kind of girls you want to have anything to do with.
Like Shechem today.
Shechem has always been a problem. Anyone who's looked at the Tanakh knows that Shechem has always been a terrible place, like as it states in the Talmud Bavli, in the Sanhedrin Kof Beth, that Shechem was always mu'ad l'furanuf, right? Sham inu et Dinah, Sham kidkelu ha-shevatim, with Yosef, etc., etc. So she had this idea. Well, no. She did this without permission. That's the meaning. The Torah is written in such a way that you have to dwell on every word. What teseh Dinah means that she went off and did this by herself, of her own volition, against her father's wishes, against her mother's wishes, against her family's wishes, because they would never have allowed such a thing. In fact, I will read something to you from the Perush of Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, son of the Rambam, a Hasid, Rabbi Avraham. I warn all feminists that you will not like what you're about to hear, but don't blame me, blame Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, if you have to blame anybody, or you can just accept the truth for what it is. He says, he says the reason that it's meant, because the pasuk says that Dinah was the son of Yaakov, which we know. Everyone knows she's the son of Yaakov. The daughter, of Yaakov. So why is it mentioned? Lirumoz, shenithrashlu b'shmiratha. In other words, they were not the family, her father, the brothers, her mother, were not sufficiently circumspect in controlling what she did and what she did not do, where she goes, where she would go and where she could go, and therefore what might happen to her. In other words, it was certainly not her parents' will that she do this. And we know what happened. Terrible story. She was raped, etc., etc. The Torah, one of the things you learn from this parasha, says Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam, is that young people, men and women, cannot be allowed just to do whatever takes their fancy. But it is the responsibility of the family, of the society, of the community, of the parents, etc., to regulate their behavior. I can mention something, a similar occurrence happened here in Israel some years ago, in Tel Aviv. A girl from a ostensibly Dati family, I don't know how Dati, I don't know what that word means exactly, but that's what I hear. That was the news report at the time. She and another young lady, they didn't live in Tel Aviv, but they decided to go to Tel Aviv. Don't ask me why. I can't imagine why you'd want to go to Tel Aviv for any reason on the planet. I avoid the place like the plague, personally.
Some people have family there. Some people have family.
That's true. You're right. I also admit to having family there. I still avoid the place like the plague. So these two young women went to Tel Aviv, and again, don't ask me why. They decided to enter some kind of a bar or pub or something like this. They just wanted to have a drink. Okay, fine. But there was a certain individual, a male, there. He managed to place some kind of narcotic into one of their drinks. She passed out, whatever. Anyhow, he managed to spirit her off to his apartment, and you can imagine the rest. And this young lady to this day suffers major psychological trauma and damage. This wouldn't have happened if she hadn't chosen to go to Tel Aviv. It wouldn't have happened if she had. I'm not saying she's to blame for everything that happened, but she's not guiltless either. She's not blameless, and her family's not blameless either. And that's exactly what Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam just said to us. And this is not a chidush of Rabbi Avraham ben Rambam. It's also Chazal say this explicitly in every possible source, in Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, here in this Midrash Tanhuma Yashan. I'll read you a line from it, perhaps. It says here in Midrash Tanhuma, Parashat Vayishlach, Oth Yod Beth, page 171 or page Pei Wow. אם האישה מרבה רגלה בשוק, סוף באה לידי קלקול, לידי זנוף. וכך התם עושה בדינה בת יעקב. כל זמן שהייתה יושבת בבית, לא נתקלקלה בעבירה. כיוון שיצאה לשוק, גרמה לעצמה לבוא לידי כלכלה. The same idea appears in about 5 different midrashim. It appears in many mefarshim. I read you one of them now. The point is that what we do, what we allow others around us to do, is very important. We cannot adopt an attitude of laissez-faire. Everyone can do what they want. She's a big girl, let her do what she wants to do. No, not so. It's not true. That's not right. That's not a Torah attitude at all. That is the attitude that the elite wants you to adopt, to think, but that's not the Torah attitude. What else do we see in this parasha? Well, there's so much in that parasha that we can't go into right now, but I want to mention something else that appears immediately after that parasha, the parasha of Shechem, which we know how it ended, right? That Shimon and Levi rose up and attacked and avenged their sister's honor, the family's honor, etc., from these barbarians. And in fact, all the brothers participated, as we know, as the pasuk says. ויקחו שני בני יעקב שמעון ולוי ההדינה איש חרבו ויבואו על העיר בטח ויהרגו כל זכר. And then the other brothers were involved as well. בני יעקב באו על החלולים ויבוזו העיר אשר טימאו אחותם. By the way, I won't go into it now, it's too long, but if you read carefully this parasha, you see that Yaakov did not criticize the action. He only criticized their lack of circumspection, their impetuousness. Because it could have worked out differently. But on the other hand, as we know, the Torah itself essentially justifies them with the last pasuk in that parasha. It says, "Vayomeru hachezona ya'aseh achotenu." It's like a sugya in the Talmud. That's the last statement. There's no response, right? And it's a tufta, en malasot. Afterwards, in the end of Sefer Bereshit, it's true that Yaakov says about Shimon and Levi, "Kaleh hamas mecherothem." That's true. But he doesn't criticize the action. He's criticizing their midah of taking risks, of taking an unnecessary risk. But in the end, it works out they were quite correct, 100% correct. And we see this also now in this current war, when we, the Jewish people, initiate things, when we take the initiative, we succeed. When we hold back, when we wait to be attacked, when we wait to be hit first and then respond, we always come off second best. Sheshet Hayamim, the 6-day war, we didn't wait. We all know what happened. Melchemet Yom Kippurim, we also know what happened. We waited, I should say, under American pressure, of course, and we know what happened. The same it's always the same. The same was true of Mivtza Sinai in Taushin Tetzai in 1956. When we take the initiative, we succeed. We succeed because Hashem is on our side. For those of you who have any doubts, we are going to win this war. We are going to win this war. We are already winning. But it should never have come to this. The problem is that we should have done all these various things a long time ago. We should never have allowed our enemies to build themselves up in that fashion for so many years. And that's because of the weakness of the Israeli public that did not want to know the truth, preferred not to hear the facts. And now we have to correct things at a very high price. But when we do the right thing, Hashem is on our side. And Hashem grants us success, even if we don't seem to be worthy of success. Once Rabbi Aryeh Levin Zetzal was asked after Sheshet Yamim, how could Hashem give such a victory to the Rashaim? Now, I'm not one to say that we don't know what a tzaddik is, we don't know what a rasha is. There are halakhic definitions for these concepts. We know that if a person is Mahalel Shabbat, he's a rasha, and if a person keeps Shabbat, he's a tzaddik. And we know that if a person does a mitzvah, he does the mitzvah as a rule, does his best to perform the mitzvah and study Torah and do Hashem's will, he's defined as a tzaddik. And if he does the opposite, he's defined as a rasha. But nevertheless, none of us know, certainly not on the national level, that's on the individual level. On the national level, none of us know the zechuyot of Am Yisrael. And we have to know that the psukim, Al Tira Avdi Yaakov, Am Noshab Adonai, all these very psukim are said about all the generations of Am Yisrael. It is true that in all generations, and certainly in this generation, we are also unfortunately infiltrated by many Rashaim Gdolim Me'od, Erev Rav Mamash. And the definition of Erev is really simple, it's not complicated. People who will fight the Torah tooth and nail at any cost, by definition they are Erev Rav. That's a straightforward, simple definition. It's mefurash in the Zohar and Tikkunei Zohar. You have other places in the Talmud, even in places which are more well-known, sources that are more open to the wider public, where if you see people behaving in a way which is not typically Jewish, then you should definitely suspect that they are not originally part of the Jewish people. Like it says in Masechet Beisan, the Talmud Bavli, Daf Lamed Daled, a certain Chacham arrived in Bavel, apparently from Eretz Yisrael, and he asked some very wealthy Jews there for tzedakah, because at that point he hadn't yet got his act together. He needed some parnasah to survive. They didn't want to talk to him. They refused his requests. So then he said, okay, let's go into a partnership. You'll give me money, I'll set up a business, and we'll split the profit. You won't lose, you only gain. Profit. You'll also make a profit. They didn't want to help him out at all. What does he say? Shema mina these people are from the Erev Rav. These are not Jewish. A Jew cannot behave in that way. Jews who could a year ago disrupt a minyan in Tel Aviv on Yom Kippur, a Jew cannot do such a thing. A person who is not Erev Rav cannot do such a thing. Impossible. I know someone who said to me already last year, he said it to me right after the war began, but he said to me that when I heard on Motzei Yom Kippur last year, that's what happened in Tel Aviv, with these tefillot being disrupted by these people, he said, I said to my wife, there's no way that Hashem will allow this to go without any response. That such an action has to be punished, has to be dealt with in some way. And days later we know what happened. Yes, so such people exist amongst us, unfortunately. And we have to ensure that they have no position of power or authority within the Jewish people. And that is our ultimate aim. Our ultimate aim is to replace them, not to somehow manage to survive with them together, listader itam. No, we have to replace them as the moral, spiritual, ideological leadership of this nation. And when we do so, B'ezrat Hashem, we will succeed even with even greater ease than we are doing at the present time.